The Arizona sun beat like a hammer the parade ground its anvil. But the sharper strike came from Cadets' laughter, bright cutting, aimed at the old man in uniform. His sleeve slipped, showing the ghost of ink, and the jeers grew louder. Walter Hartman stood in the heat hat in his hand, spine straight as a surveyor's post. His jacket hung heavy on his shoulders, cuffs whitened with salt from summers past. When he shifted, the sleeve rode up a breath, and something darker than sun-browned skin ghosted near his wrist. Ink, maybe. A line. A curve. Then cloth fell back into place. Laughter rose from the cluster of cadets, quick, bright, and edged. Who dressed Grandpa for inspection? Check the thrift store tag. Bet he wandered off from the museum. Walter didn't answer. He looked at the flag, not the faces. The wind set the cloth to talking again. The sound steadied him. It steadied more than him. Lieutenant Cole Mercer cut through the group, tall, squared, shining with certainty. "Knock it off," he told the cadets, but his mouth held a smile. He stopped 10 feet from Walter, boots planted, hands behind his back, then not. He preferred pointing. "You're out of place, sir." The last word carried no respect. "This is a training yard. Authorized personnel only." Walter tipped his chin. "I'm aware of where I am." "You aware you're wearing a uniform you didn't earn?" Mercer's voice rang just enough to draw other eyes, other phones. "Take it off. Right now." The circle tightened. Shoulders bumped. The laughter grew warm again, eager. Tessa Quinn, a cadet with a neat braid and a fast thumb, lifted her phone. "Going live," she whispered. "You're gonna want to see this." Across the yard, AM static sighed and faded as if the radio itself leaned in. Walter kept his hat low against the sun. "Young man, this jacket keeps the heat off. No more." Mercer stepped closer. "That's not the question. It's the answer I've got." Walter's voice carried a rasp, the kind sand gives a road after trucks and noon heat. A cadet snickered. "He's got a tattoo look. Old guys get anchors." Another voice, eager. "Skull and crossbones, maybe." Walter's sleeve shifted again when a gust lifted the hem. A faint arc of dark ink traced the ridge of his forearm, no more than a breath of line before fabric settled. Several cadets leaned forward, hooked by what people always are, what's hidden just out of sight. Mercer's jaw worked. "You're on federal property. You're wearing fatigues. You will remove them now or be removed." Cole said, a sergeant low behind him. "Maybe we—" Mercer didn't look back. "Stand easy, Sergeant." Walter nodded once. "I won't make trouble." Too late, someone muttered, laughter rippling again. Tessa angled her screen for comments. "Guys, look at him. He's—" "What, late 70s, 69, Walter said, polite as a clerk at the post office window. "You hear that?" another cadet said. "He can count." Mercer took a breath, squared his shoulders. "Sir, last time, remove the jacket." Walter studied the lieutenant's face, then the faces behind him, young and intent. He noticed the way one cadet's ears had gone red from sun and embarrassment. He noticed the dust halo around their boots, how the wind painted thin crescents behind each heel. He noticed the hush waiting under the laughter, the part of a crowd that wants to see where a line is drawn. "You don't want to do this," a gray-headed instructor called from the sidelines. His voice carried the tremble of something remembered, not feared. His hand was half raised, then lowered. Mercer lifted his chin. "Sir, you will comply." Walter looked down at his cuffs. The fabric was soft in the way only time can teach cloth to be. Threads showed along the stitching, pale as hair. He rubbed at the salt-white seam with his thumb, casual as a diner, regular wiping a ring of coffee. The AM radio behind the office wall stuttered, caught a sentence, lost it again, then went back to its old, faithful snow. A cadet near Tessa wrinkled his nose. "Smells like mothballs. Smells like the PX 10 summers ago," another said. "Hot plastic and starch." "Respect your elders," someone sang, almost kind, almost not. Mercer took one more step. Sun flashed along the brass of his nameplate, turned his eyes to chips of ice. "We are done here," he said. "Take it off." Walter studied the lieutenant's boots, then the flag again. He spoke not loud, but clear. "Son, there are right places for certain things. Sure is." Mercer widened his stance. "This isn't one of them." Walter's breath came slow and even. He lifted his face into the heat. Sweat traced down from his hairline ran cool along his temple, gathered at his jaw. He could taste the salt. The wind pressed his shirt to his ribs, then let go. He remembered the sound of a choir from an old church hall, far from here, just a low hum, carried through open windows in summer. He remembered words he'd said to young men before, and he chose not to say them now. "Why won't you answer him?" Tessa called. "If you're proud of it, show it." Walter turned his head slightly. "Pride is loud," he said. "Respect is quiet." "Save the bumper stickers," Mercer said. "Comply." The cadets tittered. One clapped a dry, single pop of palm to palm. Phones tilted higher. The circle tightened another step, the space around Walter shrinking like a shirt out of the dryer. Walter let the noise wash past. He watched the shadow of the flagpole swing slow, precise, like the hand of a clock sure of itself. He could feel grit against his tongue. He could smell hot dust, warm metal, the faint ghost of old starch rising off his sleeves. Sir Mercer said, voice a notch harder. "Last chance." Walter nodded once. "All right." He lifted his hand. Fingers found the first button. Cloth rasped on cloth, soft. Small, the sound of laundry in kitchens and mornings not of crowds. He loosened the top button, then the next. The cuff slid again. Ink flashed, nothing clear, only suggestion, a line like the tail of a shooting star. The breath of the group caught without meaning to, then came out as laughter, because laughter is easier than quiet. "Here we go," Tessa whispered into her little plastic window. "Live, live, live." Walter set his hat carefully on the metal table beside him. The tabletop burned his palm. He moved the hat to shade the spot, an old man's kindness to a thing that had served. He lifted his chin to the sun, eyes half-lidded against the glare. The radio behind the wall sighed, the static rising for a beat like surf and then receding. Mercer folded his arms. Finally. Walter's fingers went to the third button. The crowd leaned in salt on lips, heat on necks, cameras held high. Laughter swelled again, bright and sharp as the light. Walter began unbuttoning his jacket. The cadets laughed louder. The sun climbed the metal bleachers, throwing back a hard glare. Heat made the air wobble. The parade ground looked like it might melt and run toward the drainage grates. Phones rose higher, lenses small and bright as insects. From the mesquite beyond the fence came a dry orchestra of cicadas, steady, relentless. "Angle up, no, to the left," Tessa Quinn whispered to the cadet beside her. A string of notification pings popped like corn. "Chat says, make him prove it." Lieutenant Mercer didn't look at the screen. He watched Walter Hartman instead, impatience working the muscles along his jaw. "You heard me, sir. Jacket, off." Walter set his jaw, then bent not in surrender, but because a canvas pouch had been kicked loose by a heel. He knelt and gathered it without hurry, fingers precise, knuckles nicked white with age. The pouch had a metal zipper pull that tapped the ground with a small, bell-bright sound. He brushed grit from the cloth and laid it flat, zipper-aligned corners squared. A man who had folded many things to fit into tight places. "Look at him," a cadet said. "He's staging a picnic." "Give him a minute," another replied. "He's on old man time." Walter glanced up. "Sun time runs the same for all of us. We just hear it different." Mercer spread his hands. "We're not here to debate philosophy," good Walter said. "It loses its charm in this heat." Laughter skittered across the group, quick, uncertain. Tessa panned for faces. "Say your name for the stream, Lieutenant." "No." "Okay, mystery man. We can work with that," Tessa told her audience. Another ping chorus, brighter this time. Walter lifted the pouch, and the weight shifted inside. He steadied it with his palm. The sleeve of his jacket slid back as he did, and the ink at his forearm sharpened to a shape, a curved line meeting a smaller bar, like a road sign sketched in midnight. Not a skull, not an anchor, something older, almost geometric. Before anyone could decide what it was, the fabric fell again. "Got it," a cadet crowed. "Tattoo confirmed." "Zoom," Tessa whispered. "Zoom what? It's a smudge." "It's not a smudge," someone else said, quieter. "It's a mark." Mercer cut across the noise. "Sir, you're running out of goodwill." Walter's mouth quirked. "I didn't bring any. I came with a hat and a jacket. Then lose one of them." Walter stood slow, careful with the pouch. "You want the hat, Lieutenant, you can hold it. It's warm." He offered it. Mercer didn't take it. "Don't be cute. I'm being neighborly." From the office window, the AM radio found a station for half a heartbeat, an announcer's voice rising out of snow, "Coming to you this memorial," and then it broke apart into static again. The flag snapped just once like a reprimand, and its shadow swung a thin strip of mercy over the packed dirt. Shade crossed Walter's face for 2 beats of his heart. He breathed easier. "Thank you," he told the flagpole, the way old men thank small things. "You're talking to the hardware now," a cadet said, grinning. "Man's allowed to pray," another replied. "Pray on your own time," Mercer said. "On mine we follow rules." Jacket. Phones vibrated, bzz, 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 layered under the cicadas. Tessa read comments. "Take it off, old man. Ask him what the ink is." She lifted her head. "What is the ink, sir?" "Just ink," Walter said. "Come on, give us something." Walter returned the hat to his head, brim tilted low against the glare. "Not everything is as it looks." Tessa repeated it for the stream, almost tasting the pull line. "You hear that, chat? Everything is as it looks." Mercer stepped closer, his shadow barely touching Walter's boots. "You want to be here, play by our standards. Remove the jacket. Now." Walter didn't move. A cadet, with a fresh haircut and nerves still wearing schoolboy polish, blurted, "If it's a fake, just show it. Get a laugh and go." Another sharper. "If it's real, he shouldn't be flaunting it." "I'm not flaunting anything," Walter said. "I'm hot." "Then take it off," Mercer said, satisfied with the neat trap he'd laid. Walter sighed, a sound like an old door eased open without complaint. "There's a right way to handle things, Lieutenant. That includes people." "And there's a chain of command," Mercer replied. "It includes you only because I say so." Cole, the gray-headed instructor, called again, nearer now. "Enough." "Let me?" Sergeant Mercer snapped, not looking. "I've got it." A few cadets edged backward from the instructor's tone, then drifted forward again, curiosity winning. The phones made a little field of reflected suns. Walter lifted the pouch to the metal table and unzipped it a few inches. A neat stack of paperwork edges peeked out cream against olive canvas. He closed it again. His sleeve rode back a final time as he reached, and the tattoo's partial shape showed itself, arcs intersecting, like compass marks, a tiny crossbar, etched with older lines. Advisor Baranov, half hidden at the edge of the group, saw it and stopped. His breath caught. His right hand resting on his thigh, lifted a fraction, as if remembering an old salute that belonged to another place entirely. No one felt that tremor yet. Laughter still ruled. Tessa leaned in. "Sir, the chat says you're stalling." Walter considered the phone lens the way a man looks out a storm door at weather he will not fight. "Miss," he said gently, "your chat ever pick up a broom?" "Excuse me, it's hard to mock with a broom in your hands." He tipped his head toward the wind-blown grit. "Yard's dirty. That's not my job." "Didn't say it was. Said it helps." He paused. "Helps a person see themselves better when they're sweeping." "Is that a proverb?" the nervous cadet said. "It's something my wife told me," Walter answered. "She liked floors you could eat off." Another ripple of laughter, but softer now, like the edge of a wave losing its nerve. Mercer rolled his shoulders. "Enough parables." He lifted his hand and flicked 2 fingers toward Walter's chest. "Jacket." "Lieutenant." The gray-headed instructor said lower this time, close to Mercer's ear. "Listen to me." His voice frayed on the last word, a thread pulled once too many times. Mercer didn't turn. "If you want to be helpful, Sergeant, clear a path." Walter adjusted his cuffs. His hands were steady, but the jacket cloth rasped where the seam had gone soft with years of washing. He looked at the row of faces, at cheekbones still carrying boyhood, at eyes that wanted a show and didn't yet know the price of one. He looked at the instructor, at the way the man's throat worked around something he wasn't saying. He looked at Mercer, whose certainty shone so bright it threw its own shadow. "Young people," Walter said, "are good at heat. Older folks are good at shade." "What does that even mean?" a cadet said, half laughing, half hungry for an answer. "It means you stand where you're needed," Walter replied. "In the sun or out of it." Sir Mercer snapped, "I am not asking again." Walter's gaze shifted beyond the lieutenant's shoulder. Something in that direction made him straighten a fraction more. The flag's shadow crossed his boots again, a brief cooling band. Cicadas sang on unbothered. "Fine," Tessa said. "We'll do it your way." "One last question, sir. Are you proud of that ink?" Walter considered. "Pride is loud," he said. "Respect is quiet." "You said that already," Mercer muttered. "Some things bear repeating." Phones chimed. Someone's case clicked as a battery pack engaged with a plastic snap. A paper cup rolled along the ground, bumping the toe of a boot, and coming to rest, breathing dust. Walter took off his hat again and set it brim down, shading the table's metal for whoever would touch it next. He reached for the top button. "Here it comes," Tessa whispered to her feed. "Don't blink." A thin, unfamiliar silence fell, not the hush of respect, but the breath a crowd takes between jokes. Walter slipped the first button free. The sleeve slid once more, and this time the partial symbol sat there plainly, the geometry of it old and exact as the lines on a survey map. It pulled at the eye in a way ornament never does. Advisor Baranov saw it whole where others saw only a piece. The color left his face. His hand lifted of its own accord and trembled a small tremor that started in the fingers and ran up into the wrist as his eyes widened. The flag cracked once and settled. Heat pressed close to the yard's edge where gravel bled into scrub and the fence shimmered like water. The laughter that had been easy a minute ago faltered, thinned, and left behind a different sound, a careful quiet that wasn't quite respect, not yet. Walter Hartman met the older instructor's eyes across the small gulf of bodies. The man had paused mid-step, hand half raised as if reaching for a switch only he remembered. His nameplate read Baranov, the letters dulled with age and polish. Walter gave him a steady, ordinary look, the kind that says, "I see you without a fuss." Lieutenant Mercer felt the shift and bristled against it. Eyes front, he snapped at no one in particular, then louder, "Phones down. This isn't a circus." Tessa Quinn swallowed and lowered her screen a few inches. "Stream can hear you," she murmured, "but not to anyone." Her thumb hesitated over the red button. Baranov's fingers trembled once, then stilled at his thigh. He took a breath that didn't go all the way in. "Lieutenant," he said, voice careful. "Let me," I said. "I've got it," Mercer cut in. "Sir," he added to Walter, enough theater. "Jacket. Off." Walter stayed where he was. "You keep saying that like the next word'll make it kinder." "It's not supposed to be kind," Mercer said. "It's supposed to be clear." Baranov stepped forward, the gravel popping under his heels. "Cole." Mercer didn't look at him. "Sergeant, with respect." "With respect." Baranov said, each word stitched with something tight and old. "You don't know what you're looking at." "What I'm looking at," Mercer said, "is a violation of uniform regs on a federal installation." Walter smiled without showing teeth. "He's not wrong about the regs." "And you're not wrong about people," Baranov returned, eyes moving to Walter's sleeve. "Sir." "May I?" Walter tipped his chin a fraction, granting nothing and everything at once. The wind shifted. The flag's shadow crept outward, a narrow band of cool that crossed boots and wavered. Tessa let her phone drop to her chest. "Is anyone else feeling weird?" she whispered to the cadet beside her. "Shh," the cadet said, not mean, just intent. Sweat ridge-lined his temple. No one laughed now. Even the cicadas seemed to tuck their noise into the heat. Mercer understood that the air was getting away from him. He raised his voice. "Crowd, give us space. Move back." No one moved. "Back," he barked, but the syllable hit a wall of attention that didn't belong to him anymore. Baranov addressed Walter softly. "Sir, your cuff." Walter obliged, not theatrical, simply neat. He rolled the cuff once. Ink came into view, intersecting arcs, measured lines, a small crossbar etched so fine it could have been hair. Nothing flashy. The quiet geometry of something earned privately and carried carefully. A breath ran through the ring of cadets like wind through dry grass. Tessa's phone slipped lower. "What?" Is that Walter's voice stayed even. "Old work." "Which work?" Mercer demanded. "The kind you don't post about," Walter said. Mercer's lip twitched. "So it's a story then." "It's a life," Walter said. "Stories get endings." Baranov lifted his hand as if to touch and stopped before the ink. His fingers hovered, respectful, shaking once. He didn't ask the question in his throat. He changed it. "How long?" he said. "Have you carried that long enough to forget the weight?" "Except in summer," Walter answered. "Heat seems to remember for me." Mercer tried to reclaim ground. "This is off topic." "It's exactly the topic," Baranov said, eyes never leaving the mark. He glanced at Tessa. "Phone down, cadet." She dropped it to her side as if it had gotten heavy. "Yes, Sergeant." Mercer turned a quarter step toward Baranov, then back to Walter. "Sir, no more stalling. son Walter said gently. You ever find yourself talking louder when you're least sure, I'm sure, Mercer said. About what Walter asked. That you don't belong in that jacket. Walter nodded once. That's a kind of certainty. Baranov's tone thinned. Cole. For the last time, the yard shifted again, bodies making small paths without thinking. At the fence line, 2 maintenance men in sun-bleached ball caps had paused with a coil of hose heads tilted like birds listening for rain. From the open window, a faint hum rose and settled the edge of a choir rehearsal, drifting from the chapel, down the road, carried by the same wind that swung the halyard. Walter heard it and smiled. You hear that, what Mercer said? Practice, Walter said. Folks getting ready to do something right. Mercer snorted. We don't need a soundtrack. Tessa almost involuntarily said, It's kind of nice. Baranov took one more small step, close enough now that he spoke without raising his voice. Sir, I recognize the lines. Not all of them, but enough to know what they are not. What are they not? Mercer asked, baiting. Tourist ink. Barinov said, still not looking at him. Souvenir ink. They aren't that. Congratulations to all involved, Mercer said, rolling his eyes. We done? Walter turned his head slowly to face Mercer. No one's trying to beat you, Lieutenant. I'm not in a race. You sound winded. A cadet coughed into his fist to hide a smile. Another shifted uncomfortable with the sudden sympathy he felt for the man he had mocked. The shade slid off the group again. Heat took the place it always takes. Baranov's voice gained an edge. Cole, your authority is not in question. Could have fooled me. What's in question, Baranov said, is your judgment. Mercer flushed high on the cheekbones and hid it by squaring his shoulders. My judgment says we finish the ID check we started. Sir, remove the jacket. Walter's hands moved to the buttons. He didn't rush. For what it's worth, he said, I didn't come here to make a point. What did you come here for? Tessa asked, phone forgotten at her side. To see how people behaved when they thought no one important was watching. Walter said. It tells you nearly everything you need to know. About what she asked quieter. About who to trust. The words didn't land hard. They landed true. They lay there in the dust and didn't need help to be seen. Mercer jutted his chin. Trust is earned. Walter's mouth tipped. It is. Often without speeches. Baranov looked down the line of cadets, then back at Walter. Sir, he said, careful if you'll allow me. Sergeant Mercer snapped, step back. Baranov didn't. No. The refusal was not loud. It didn't need to be. It changed the shape of the air. Mercer opened his mouth and closed it again. Bootsteps sounded from the far side of the yard, measured unhurried, the kind that do not have to hurry to be obeyed. Conversation thinned to threads, heads turned before orders told them to. Tessa's phone slid screen down onto the top of her boot. A man in starched khaki rounded the corner of the building cover, tucked under one arm, eyes already reading the room. The sun caught on the silver at his temples and on the small brass of his name tag. He didn't raise his voice. Enough, he said. Silence took the yard whole. Mercer straightened like a line being pulled taut. Colonel Hale, he said, crisp relief and alarm fighting in the same breath. Hale's gaze moved once around the circle and settled on Walter's face, then on Baranov's hand, then on the quiet geometry at Walter's wrist. He didn't ask for briefing. He didn't demand reasons. He stepped into the space between people and heat and expectation and made a small room for truth to stand up in. "Show me," he said. It wasn't a challenge. It wasn't even an order. It was the right sentence at the right time. Walter looked at him the way a man looks at a door he thought was locked and finds open. He nodded once. His fingers went to the buttons again, working cloth that had known years and laundries and hands. The flag's shadow crossed his boots, a ribbon of cool that stayed just long enough to be a kindness. At the edge of the group, Tessa Quinn drew a breath and let it out slow. She bent, picked up her phone, and after a flicker of habit, clicked the screen dark. "Not everything is content," she whispered to herself more than anyone. The choir hum from down the road, braided with the wind, filled the spaces between heartbeat and breath. Gravel settled under soles. Walter loosened the last button he meant to loosen and took the hem in both hands. He met Advisor Baranov's gaze steady as fence posts, then shifted to Colonel Hale and held there an old courtesy that didn't need teaching. He let the jacket fall. The jacket slid from Walter Hartman's shoulders with the patient weight of old cloth, the kind that remembers every summer it has carried through. Sun took the exposed skin, first lighting the map of his shoulders and the careful measured ink along his forearm. The lines weren't loud. They were geometry more than decoration arcs that met with purpose, a crossbar thin as a hair marks, placed where only someone who knew where to look would ever find them. Advisor Baranov's knee touched the dirt before the jacket had folded into itself. It wasn't a fall. It was a decision his body made without asking his mind's permission. The gravel pressed through his trousers, and the heat rose, and still he went down, head bowed a fraction. His hand hovered over the ink, not touching, as a man hovers over a book he has read many times and still will not smudge with his thumb. That small motion, one officer kneeling, not from fear, not from injury, but from recognition, moved through the ring of cadets like wind through tall grass. Laughter already thinned to threads disappeared. A hush gathered itself, not demanded, not ordered, but arriving the way shade arrives when a cloud considers mercy. Colonel Hale stood 2 paces in front of Walter Hatt, under his arm, eyes steady. He had not asked for explanations. He had asked for truth in the only sentence that fit. He saw the ink, yes, but he also saw Walter's stance, the way the man held himself, as if the ground deserved respect, as if the flag deserved it, as if all the young eyes around him deserved it most of all. The colonel took in Baranov's knee in the dust, the heat shimmering off the parade ground, the phones now turned down or dark. He took in the year's first real weight of Memorial Day and the quiet it demands. Walter did not speak. He reached into the canvas pouch he had squared earlier with the same careful thrift he gave every action. Metal kissed canvas with a dry, bright tap. When his hand came back up, a coin lay in his palm, a modest piece of work silver, with a warm cast, not the flash of enamel or the boast of a trophy. The light found the raised edges and ran them like the finger of a blind reader. Whatever symbol had been abstract in ink now resolved there in relief, the same arcs and crossbar, the same quiet geometry, repeated in metal meant to outlast hands. He held it out, open palm to the morning. No pronouncement, no claim. The coin did not need anything from the crowd. It had already been earned elsewhere. Baranov's breath left him in a thin sound. He lowered his head the last inch and set his hand flat and gentle to the dirt. Transfer of trust had already happened in him. The rest of the yard simply caught up. The wind, so busy a minute ago, forgot its errand. Flags that had snapped now hung in clean lines, the halyards clack-tap falling silent against the pole. Somewhere behind glass, an AM radio struggled through static, and then, like a choir gathering breath between him and him, found an older melody. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The music arrived like a memory you didn't know you'd kept. Colonel Hale drew himself to full height. The sun made a blade of light along his jaw, picked out the stitch lines at his shoulder. He didn't look around to see if anyone watched. A salute is not for an audience. He lifted his right hand slow and exact and brought it to his brow. It was not a flourish. It was the same motion he had made 1,000 times, only truer, because it was not attached to a ceremony or a camera or a speech. It was attached to a man in a faded jacket, holding a coin that meant whatever it meant before any of them were born. Hale's palm cut the air clean, and in that space the yard understood itself. Cadets do not snap to attention for a story. They snap for standards. They snap for witness. One young man with ears sunburned at the tips found his heels without thinking. Another beside him pulled her shoulders back so fast her phone slid from her fingers into the dust. Across the ring, postures corrected themselves the way a room of pews straightens when the first note is struck in tune. Chins lifted. Thumbs found seams. Eyes stopped looking and started seeing. Walter's arm did not move. He held the coin as if it were water, and he were determined not to spill a drop. The quiet geometry in his ink matched the relief in the metal, and the two together said what he would not say out loud. He watched the colonel salute without pride and without refusal, only with the acceptance of a recognition rightly given. Hale's hand stayed a heartbeat longer than regulation, then lowered with the same care. He took a step that brought him within reach of Walter's open palm and did not take the coin. He looked at it, then at Walter's face, and the smallest of nods passed between men who have long since left room in their lives for boasting. Many of the cadets did not know what the coin was. They only knew that a man they trusted to be exact had saluted, and another man they trusted to be exact had taken a knee, and the math of that added up to more than laughter can hold. What they felt landed in their throats, heavy and right. The cicadas, as if even they understood an old boundary, had been stepped to and not crossed, lowered their saws a fraction. Mercer stood on the edge of it, set in place by the thing he had started, and could no longer steer. His mouth was a line made for orders, and in that moment no order fit. Heat flushed him, and then withdrew as if the sun had gone behind a cloud, just for him, and then decided better of it. He watched the coin without breathing for a count of 3, and found to his surprise that he could not make his feet do the casual little shift of disdain his body had done so easily 20 minutes before. Baranov lifted his head, but stayed where he was, one knee down. His eyes never left the coin. He had not asked for permission to kneel. He would not ask for permission to rise. That was not what this moment was for. The colonel, who had long practice reading rooms and men, did not turn to lecture the young, did not turn to pardon the proud, did not turn to translate the private into the public. He let the hush hold. He let the music, thin as it was, through wall and distance, lift the value of silence higher than any speech. Walter turned his hand slightly so that the metal flashed, then steadied again. He did not offer the coin to anyone. He offered it to the air, to the day, to the memory stacked up behind the day. The smell of hot dust and old starch and faint machine oil arranged themselves into the kind of scent a person will recognize years later at some other parade ground and not know why their chest tightens. One by one, as if receiving a command from a place older than rank, the cadets' shoulders settled into attention. The movement made no sound, and all the sound at once. Even Tessa Quinn, whose fingers had learned the weight of a camera before some of these boys had learned the weight of a wrench, found her hands along her seams and her eyes on the coin. She did not know what the mark meant. She knew what it asked. Outrage had burned itself to ash and blown away. Justice, the quiet kind, took the space where outrage had stood. No one apologized yet. No one excused. The first step to both is seeing. The radio's hymn reached a line that half of them knew and the other half had heard in passing. A harmony note found a second one imperfect but earnest. The wind did its part and did not shove. Hale finally spoke, not to break the quiet, but to set it. "Thank you," he said, as if Walter had handed him back a thing he'd been charged to guard. The words were simple and correct. They were not enough and exactly enough. Walter nodded once. He closed his fingers around the coin, the metal warming to his skin without complaint. He did not pocket it. He kept his hand closed over it at his side. The ink along his forearm, bared now without the jacket's mercy, lay against the air like a line drawn with a carpenter's pencil, a true line, not showy, not fragile. On the far edge of the formation, a cadet sniffed and then stood angry at himself for it. Another shifted and made the decision to stop smiling in a way that had protected him more than he'd known. Tessa glanced at Mercer and looked away because some looks are disrespect and some are rescue, and she did not yet know which one she owned. Mercer swallowed. The word he had been saving, comply, died in his mouth. He took one half step that could have been forward and could have been back and settled for neither. He tried again to locate himself in rank and failed in a way that might save him later if he let it. Hale inclined his head to Walter, then to Baranoff, without asking him to rise. He let the weight distribute itself to the places it belonged. He glanced once to the office window, where the radio kept on with its small bravery, then back to the circle of faces, some flushed, some pale, all changed. Respect is not a switch. It is a door swung on well-oiled hinges. The room it opens into has air that is easier to breathe. The coin caught one last thread of light and then lay quiet in Walter's fist. He lowered his hand. His shoulders eased, not in relief exactly, but in the release that comes when a thing has been spoken without words and heard without argument. Cadets, as if given a nonverbal count, snapped to attention in one gathered motion. The sound of heels settling on packed dirt was as small as rain beginning. Backs straightened. Eyes lifted to the flag. A line once crooked with eagerness went true. Baranoff rose, then not to full height, not yet. He stood enough to stand beside his own choice. He looked to Hale. Hale gave a slight nod, the kind that says seen and good in the same inch of motion. The hush held. The hymn thinned and turned back into static, having done what it was asked to do. The wind thought about coming back and decided to wait another minute. The Memorial Day sun stayed high and honest. Mercer's voice, when it finally found him, was not the voice he had used this morning. It had to fit through a smaller place. "My God," he whispered, not aiming the words at anyone and unable to keep them to himself. "Who is he?" The diner on Main had blinds that cut the afternoon into patient stripes. Sugar packets stood in their boat like soldiers at ease. Somewhere behind the counter, a radio found the tail end of a hymn from the church hall down the block, a warm, steady hum, as familiar as the smell of coffee and fried eggs that weren't on the menu this late, but always could be. Walter Hartman chose the stool nearest the register and set his coin on the laminate. It made a small, precise sound, metal finding a place meant for it. The token lay in the light like a quiet answer. Irene, the owner, paused with a pot in her hand and nodded once as if the coin had ordered. "Refill?" she asked. "Please," Walter said. The spoon in his cup chimed when she set it down. A cadet at the corner table glanced up at the sound as if it were a bell in a school he hadn't realized he'd enrolled in. The door opened, and Lieutenant Mercer stepped in cap in hand. The bell above the frame gave its usual jingle and did not make a ceremony of it. He looked different already, less iron along the jaw, more daylight in the eyes. Behind him, Tessa Quinn and 3 others drifted in hats off shoulders, unsure. They filled a booth, and then thought better of it, sliding to the edges so they could stand if needed. Irene watched the group with the kind of attention that has put out small fires for 30 years. She poured Walter's coffee and left the pot to warm his elbow, then folded a towel, which is the diner way of clearing a space for truth. Mercer approached the counter. The coin lay between him and Walter, bright and modest. "Sir," he said. Walter looked up. "Lieutenant." Mercer swallowed. "I owe you more than one thing. An apology to start." He didn't turn to look for an audience, but the room gathered anyway. The cadets set their phones face down without being asked. Even the couples by the windows, the ones who'd mastered the art of talking about groceries and grandchildren with proper gravity, paused. "I was wrong," Mercer said. The words showed their work. "I was loud when I should have been careful. I was proud when I should have been curious. I used authority where I needed respect." Irene set a saucer by his elbow, not intrusive, just there if his hands needed somewhere safe to go. Mercer nodded toward the coin. "I don't know all the stories behind that. Maybe I don't get to. But I know enough to say I'm sorry here, not just on the yard." Walter let the steam from his cup meet the cool air and watched the curl. He made the space a man should make before he takes words seriously. "Thank you," he said. "I should say it to them too." Mercer turned, found his cadets, and straightened, not for show but for backbone. "I'm sorry," he told them, "for what I led with and what I didn't see." Tessa lifted her chin. "We followed," she said. "We should have asked better questions." "Learning's not a straight road," Irene said, polishing a spot that didn't need polishing. "Lucky for you, we got a long counter." A soft breath of laughter loosened the room. The choir hum from the church hall thickened a shade, as if the altos had found their note. The door opened again. Librarian Irene Whitaker, no kin to diner Irene, though the town had tried to make a puzzle of it, came in with a folder clutched to her sweater like a hymnal. She wore the expression of a woman delivering news to a board, but hoping for an amen. "I didn't mean to interrupt," she said, though she had. "But I was asked to read this." "Go on, Irene Diner," Irene said, and flipped the open sign so the glare wouldn't catch on the glass. Librarian Irene unfolded a single page. Her voice had the clear school bell ring of the library's story hour. "To the cadets and staff who stood on the yard today, you do not know me. You likely won't. But you gave me a gift, the sight of young people finding the right kind of quiet. Respect isn't claimed, it's given." Tessa mouthed the words as they came, feeling the shape of her own caption and finding it smaller than the sentence deserved. "You'll learn more in the next year than you think your head can hold. May some of it be this loud. Is easy quiet is earned. Pride shows up early. Respect stays for the cleanup. A neighbor. Librarian." Irene looked up. "Anonymous," she said, though her eyes caught Walter and moved on. "Dropped in our book return with the morning papers." Mercer managed one corner of a smile. "Good neighbors," he said. "The kind that bring casseroles and leave before you can say thank you, Diner," Irene said. "Bless them." The spoon in Walter's cup made another small ring when he touched it. He looked at Mercer, then at the cadets. "You'll be fine," he said. "You'll have days you aren't. Those count too." A cadet at the booth cleared his throat. "Sir, about the yard, about how we—" Walter lifted a hand, a small traffic signal. "No one here owes me anything but the truth when it's due. You gave it today." Mercer exhaled. "I thought respect came with rank." Walter tipped his head. "Rank can rent it. Character buys it." Mercer nodded once as if a long equation had finally balanced. He looked at the coin and then away, self-correcting the instinct to reach. Tessa folded her hands on the formica like a child at grace. "Permission to learn quieter," she said, half to the room. "Permission granted," librarian Irene said, "which is a librarian's prerogative." From the church hall, the hum resolved into a familiar hymn the town used for every kind of occasion, welcome, farewell, and everything between. It threaded through the blinds and the coffee steam, and made a temporary home of the diner's warm light. Mercer squared himself to Walter again. "Sir, I can't ask details." He looked careful with the next words, placed them like a cup too full. "But if there's ever a way for us to help the ones who helped us quietly, I'd like to do that work." Walter accepted the apology with a nod that was almost a bow and not at all a surrender. "There's always work," he said. "Most of it is small. Most of it is done where no one claps." Librarian Irene closed her folder. "Speaking of small work that lasts," she said, finding her courage at the same counter where half the town has found theirs, the board met at lunch. "We'd like to show you something." She reached into a larger envelope and drew out a rectangle of heavy paper. She held it with two hands, the way church ladies hold casseroles and librarians hold first editions. "It's a design," she said, smile uncertain but present. "For a plaque in the library foyer. Just a sketch for now. A place to say what we can say." Diner Irene leaned over the counter and peered, eyes going soft. The cadets stood not to crowd, but because standing felt right. Mercer took half a step and stopped, letting the town set its pace. The spoon in Walter's cup made one last light ring as it settled. He didn't reach for the paper. He let Irene hold it up where the blinds broke the light into clean lines across the drawing. The coin on the counter caught a sliver of late sun and rested under it like a compass finding north. Outside, a delivery truck downshifted at the corner, then rolled on slow, respectful of crosswalks and lives. The choir scaled down the last chord, lingering like a blessing. Librarian Irene drew a breath. "If you'll come by the foyer after supper," she said, "we'd be honored to show you the real thing." She turned the sketch toward the room and unveiled the plaque design. The foyer of the town library had been swept until the terrazzo floor glimmered. Sun came through high windows and turned the dust motes into small lanterns. Choir practice from the church next door drifted in faint a hymn, giving way to silence, as if the building itself held its breath. At the center, draped in a cloth of deep blue, stood the plaque. Librarian Irene waited with her hands folded the way one waits before lighting a candle. Cadets in clean uniforms lined the wall. Mercer stood among them, his cap held tight, his posture careful. Walter Hartman was there too. Jacket buttoned, coin no longer in sight. He made no move to speak. The cloth was pulled. Brass caught the light. At its center, engraved into permanence, was the coin arcs and crossbar geometry carried from skin to metal to memory. Below, words for service seen and unseen. Respect isn't claimed, it's given. A murmur rose, not chatter, but breath. A Shorts moment lingered in close-up coin relief shining in the plaque. Phones stayed in pockets. The respect was live, not recorded. The librarian lifted her voice. "The board also approved a scholarship," she said, her tone steady as story hour. "For local cadets, those who serve and those who will. A small thing, but lasting." Heads bowed, not commanded, just done. Later at the post office, elders in line nodded at Walter without comment. One man tapped his cane twice against the tile as if punctuation. Another tipped his cap. Silent thanks traded like letters across a counter. Evening came softer. On a porch swing, Walter settled with the radio tuned low. Oldies drifted warm through the screen door. The swing creaked a patient rhythm. Across the street, lights in the church went out one by one. He looked neither proud nor sorrowful, only steady. The plaque was in its place now, the scholarship begun, the cadets chastened and changed. He had said little, but the silence he left behind was full. The radio hummed out a chorus from decades ago, strings and brass warm as memory. Retention pull. 7 silent thanks last the longest. Walter rocked once the swing keeping time with the tune. Closing line. Have you ever seen a silent thank you? The library's foyer glowed softly that evening, its brass plaque catching the lamplight, as townsfolk paused to read the inscription, a quiet acknowledgement that outlasted speeches. A coin once resting in a calloused palm now shone in its engraving, a reminder that dignity survives mockery, and that justice often arrives in silence rather than thunder. In a world eager to measure worth by appearances, the lesson stood steady: kindness given without expectation is like a lamp in a winter window, guiding others long after the flame is tended. Outside, elders nodded to cadets in the post office line, and the scholarship fund promised that respect would continue through those still learning how to carry it. People stand a little straighter now.